Lepka old men of 80 copulate with girls of 8, and nobody minds. After all, Dante fell madly in love with his Beatrice when she was 9, a sparkling girline, painted and lovely, and bejewelled, in a crimson frock. And this was in 1274, in Florence, at a private feast in the merry month of May. And when Petrarch fell madly in love with his Laurine, she was a fair-haired nymphette of 12, running in the wind, in the pollen and dust, a flower in flight, in the beautiful plain as descried from the hills of Vaucluse. But let us be prim and civilized. Humbert tried hard to be good, really and truly he did. He had the utmost respect for ordinary children, with their purity and vulnerability, and under no circumstances would he have interfered with the innocence of a child, if there was the least risk of a row. But how his heart beat when among the innocent throng he espied a demon child. Enfant charmant et fourbe, dim eyes, bright lips, 10 years in jail if you only show her you are looking at her. So life went. Humbert was perfectly capable of intercourse with Eve, but it was Lilith he longed for. The bud stage of breast development appears early, 10.7 years, in the sequence of somatic changes accompanying pubescence. And the next maturational item available is the first appearance of pigmented pubic hair, 11.2 years. My little cup brims with tiddles. A shipwreck, an atoll, alone with a drowned passenger's shivering child. Darling, this is only a game. How marvellous were my fancied adventures as I sat on a hard park bench pretending to be immersed in a trembling book. Around the quiet scholar, nymphets played freely as if he were a familiar statue or part of an old tree's shadow and sheen. Once, a perfect little beauty in a tartan frock, with a clatter, put her heavily armed foot near me upon the bench to dip her slim bare arms into me and tighten the strap of her roller skate. And I dissolved in the sun, with my book for fig leaf, as her auburn ringlets fell all over her skinned knee, and the shadow of leaves I shared pulsated and melted on her radiant limb next to my chameleonic cheek. Another time a red-haired schoolgirl hung over me in the metro, and a revelation of axillary russet I obtained remained in my blood for weeks. I could list a great number of these one-sided diminutive romances. Some of them ended in a rich flavour of hell. It happened, for instance, that from my balcony I would notice a lighted window across the street and what looked like a nymphette in the act of undressing before a cooperative mirror. Thus isolated, thus removed, the vision acquired an especially keen charm that made me race with all speed toward my lone gratification. But abruptly, fiendishly, the tender pattern of nudity I had adored would be transformed into the disgusting lamp-lit bare arm of a man in his underclothes reading his paper by the open window in the hot, damp, hopeless summer night. Rope-skipping, hopscotch. That old woman in black who sat down next to me on my bench, on my rack of joy, a nymphette was groping under me for a lost marble, and asked if I had stomachache, the insolent hag. Oh, leave me alone in my pubescent park, in my mossy garden. Let them play around me forever. Never grow up. Apropos, I've often wondered what became of those nymphets later. In this wrought-iron world of criss-cross cause and effect, could it be that the hidden throb I stole from them did not affect their future? I had possessed her, and she never knew it. All right, but would it not tell sometime later? Had I not somehow tampered with her fate by involving her image in my voluptas? Oh, it was and remains a source of great and terrible wonder. I learned, however, what they look like, these lovely, maddening, thin-armed nymphets, when they grow up. I remember walking along an animated street on a grey spring afternoon somewhere near the Madeleine. A short, slim girl passed me at a rapid, high-heeled, tripping step. We glanced back at the same moment. She stopped, and I accosted her. She came hardly up to my chest hair, and had the kind of dimpled, round little face French girls so often have, and I liked her long lashes, and tight-fitting tailored dress, sheathing in pearl grey, her young body, which still retained, and that was the nymphic echo, the chill of delight, the leap in my loins, a childish something mingling with the professional frétillement of her small, agile rump. I asked her price, and she promptly replied with a melodious silvery precision, a bird, a very bird, 100. I tried to haggle, but she saw the awful lone longing in my lowered eyes, directed so far down at her round forehead and rudimentary hat, a band, a posy. And with one beat of her lashes, tant pis, she said, and made as if to move away. Perhaps only 3 years earlier I might have seen her coming home from school. That evocation settled the matter. She led me up the usual steep stairs, with the usual bell clearing the way for the monsieur, who might not care to meet another monsieur on the mournful climb to the abject room, all bed and bidet. As usual, she asked at once for her petit cadeau, and as usual I asked her name, Monique, and her age, 18. I was pretty well acquainted with the banal way of streetwalkers. They all answered 18, a trim twitter, a note of finality and wistful deceit which they emit up to 10 times per day, the poor little creatures. But in Monique's case, there could be no doubt that she was, if anything, adding 1 or 2 years to her age. This I deduced from many details of her compact, neat, curiously immature body. Having shed her clothes with fascinating rapidity, she stood for a moment partly wrapped in the dingy gauze of the window curtain, listening with infantile pleasure, as pat could be, to an organ grinder in the dust-brimming courtyard below.